Hello everybody and welcome back to another GT Sport race. This time we're the Manufacturers Championship. I'm racing for Porsche, as you're about to see in just a second. This is my first time racing in either the Nations or Manufacturers Championship. All races I've done so far have been daily races and trying to improve my racecraft and daily rating. Now that my rating is at B and S, I felt like now is the best time to jump into the races that were more about being consistent and being thoroughly prepared with a good strategy. We are racing at Monza without the first chicane, which is great because we are not going to have as much carnage as opposed to the GP layout. I managed to qualify 5th, which is surprising because the 911 RSR is not the fastest in a straight line, and this is a track that's all about horsepower more than anything else. So you can expect pretty much everyone to piggyback on the slipstream of the guys in front. The strategy for this race is a no-stop strategy and everyone's on hard tires, so it's a race all about consistency and attrition. This is actually my second session. The server crashed on the first session before we even made it to the second lap, which in hindsight is fine considering I qualified 9th. By the way, this is round 2 of the series, with round 1 taking place in Red Bull Ring's short circuit layout, which was pretty bad for me as I ended up finishing at the back of the grid. The Group 4 car I was given by Porsche was the Cayman GT4, which was not the best choice for the type of circuit. Then again, the RSR is also not that great in power circuits, also not that great on tire wear either. I mostly chose Porsche because they handle relatively well, at least for me. So without further ado, like and subscribe for more GT Sport content, as I'll be updating the Manufacturer series as we go along, alongside the daily racing content. So let's get the race started. It's a rolling start, which again minimizes the carnage that is unavoidable regardless of the level of drivers that are in the lobby. Because it's Monza, it's just inevitable. Starting 5th, ahead of me we got 2 Aston Martins who are relatively fast, and ahead of them we have the Italian in the Mercedes-Benz AMG, and at the front we have a Russian in the American-made Ford GT, which for some reason I think is incredibly hilarious. As you can see, everybody has filed up into a single row to take advantage of the slipstream. It's almost like as if everybody is adhering to the social distancing protocols of today, which in racing is not going to last very long, especially at the first chicane. There's already trouble brewing as the group ahead is fighting for position and trying to maintain control, and I say that as one of them gets a penalty and we come into the first chicane and almost go into the rear of the Aston Martin. But we somehow managed to keep it clean coming out, but obviously we cannot say the same for the Aston Martins as they both end up with a penalty. The green Aston Martin gets an additional 2 seconds on top of the one he got before coming into the chicane. The Ford GT has somehow lost his lead and goes right into the Aston Martin, and yet gets away clean without a penalty, but karma comes knocking as he forgets to brake entirely and takes a trip down the gravel pit. Just up ahead, the other Aston Martin in the Golf livery has to serve his penalty of 2 seconds, so now we have been handed us 3 positions simply by avoiding any trouble. I guess that is what happens when you put on the Racing Point livery. Life just becomes a whole lot easier. But let's try and not bottle it the same way Lance Stroll did in the Turkish Grand Prix, as he went from pole position all the way down to 9th. If you don't watch Formula 1, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. So let's put our focus back on this race, as now all we have left to deal with is Mr. Gladius in the Mercedes. And that is really where things get really tricky. The Porsche, as I've said before, is not the fastest car in the lobby. So the only way we can stay competitive is by staying behind the faster car till the right moment comes. Right now it's all about putting the pressure on the guys ahead, or in this case the leader, but also at the same time making sure that there's enough space to breathe. The last thing we want to do is use him as my brakes and ruin the race for the both of us. You should see me do the complete opposite of what I just said in another video, which you can watch after this one. So we're now in the second lap and everybody is pretty evenly spaced out, but still close enough where one simple mistake can cost us a position. The Aston Martin, by the look of it, has picked up another penalty, and as we reach the chicane, you can see how close the racing actually is, which is not always very clear to us when we're driving and we are focused on our immediate surroundings. The Merc up ahead seems to be doing a very good job at keeping his pace, as I'm trying to do the same as well by keeping my tires from degrading early on. It's reassuring to know everybody else has to do the same, but it's not easy when you still have to keep your pace up. But it does help when the people behind you have penalties to serve, so it makes the gap between you and them even larger. So we're gonna skip ahead almost 2 laps to start the 4th, and I'm able to put in the fastest lap, which is good news as that tells me that I'm able to keep the pace more or less the same as everybody else who's in a faster car. In this case, obviously I'm faster. And I say that as we're closing the gap between the Merc and I, which is good, but also we don't want to overtake now, as it's still pretty early in the race, and it's not going to be the best case scenario for us to go back and forth in positions, as the Merc and I take turns to use the slipstream off on each other. Coming into the chicane, the Merc seems to struggle quite a bit getting on the power and not spinning out. Again, this is not good news, this just means that he's prone to making mistakes, and causing us to slow down means the pack behind can catch up, and that adds more to the risks that we have to deal with. So now he's only 300th of a second ahead, which is way too close for comfort in my opinion, as I have no idea where his breakpoints are or how he will choose to defend his position. Coming down the straight heading to Ascari, you can see the power of the Merc as he's able to pull out ahead, but we're still close enough to be in the slipstream. And that is exactly how we end up screwing things up, as we forget to brake early and send ourselves almost into the gravel where recovering would be incredibly difficult. Thankfully, the Spaniard behind in the Aston Martin was 6 seconds behind, so it was enough room for us to maintain P2. So now we are heading off to Parabolica, but the Merc has put himself in a safe distance where I can no longer hold on to his slipstream. So this is a problem, because the Porsche is slow. Did I mention that? I think I have, haven't I? Several times. And that is evident if you take a look at the intervals, and the Aston Martin is clearly creeping up on us. So we're gonna skip on ahead to lap 6, once again heading down to Ascari where we're caught up with the Merc, but at the same time just a little bit too eager to get our pace closer. So we end up going over the sausage curbs, and with all 4 wheels on the curb, the worst thing that could possibly happen becomes reality. And that is getting a penalty of, wait for it, 0.5 seconds. I think we owe our thanks to the stewards for letting us off with just a slight tap of the wrist. Even though the stewards we're talking about here is just a bunch of really complicated code that does change every now and then and leaves the GT community in quite the uproar about how unfair it sometimes can be, which is true. So now we have a penalty to serve, with the car ahead nowhere close to get a slipstream going, and a bunch of cars behind that are definitely faster on a straight line. So we are definitely in a pickle right here. We're going to skip on ahead to where the penalty line is, which is out of Lesmo 2, but the first thing we see coming out of Lesmo 1 is the Merc almost saying hello to the barrier, but recovering just in time, but also missing his braking point and going wide. This actually works in our favor because with a penalty to serve, we can let Gladius in the Merc go right past us. So this leaves us with a slipstream to hold on to, because had we gone up to P1, the Merc would still be able to catch up and we would end up having to defend. And that would just lead to the guys behind being able to catch up. And that is something I think a lot of amateurs seem to forget, even myself included, where if you waste your energy defending, you end up losing a lot of time opening up the gap for the guys behind to come closing in. So now we've gotten back our slipstream, but at the same time now I realized we're gonna have to be a lot more cautious of the chance that Gladius could screw up again. I've actually never driven the GT3 Merc enough to know how it handles, especially the tire wear, as I'm learning now how fast the rear tires on the Porsche do in fact die of a very painful death. We are now coming into the last phase of the race where the guys at the back are catching up, and we have to take it easy on our tires as well and brake a little bit smoother and lift off where it's necessary. So it's going to be like this for a couple of laps, so we're gonna skip on ahead. This video is already long enough, and commentating over it when my native language is not English can be difficult, especially when this part of the editing phase ends up taking double the time that it takes to edit. So now is the time to make a move and try to overtake, because if we don't get it done now, chances are we're going to be spending a lot of time staring at the back of the Merc and giving the others a chance to overtake us. Gladius is definitely struggling with tire degradation and seems to lose a lot of pace coming out of Della Roggia and the 2 Lesmos. So it's definitely now or never. And coming out of Della Roggia, we spot what seems to be the Russian in the Ford GT. I'm so puzzled at the fact he started on pole position and fell all the way back to the bottom, and now he's getting lapped. I don't know how bad the tire wear is or just how many penalties he got to get himself all the way here. But hey, at least he's caught up with the action now. You can see that the Aston Martin is slowly gaining on us by shaving off at least a tenth each lap, but he's also struggling around the corners. And coming down to Ascari, remember this is where the Merc is also losing a lot of pace, but at the same time we are also prone to making mistakes here, and we better not repeat them if we want to win the race. And the straight right here is perfect for us to gain the last few tenths and make a move for the lead. For some reason, Gladius is in no mood to defend himself as he leaves the inside line open for us to sling ourselves and send it right onto Parabolica. We are now racing wheel to wheel and we end up braking almost at the same time, but Gladius ends up turning right into me. I think he misjudged on how much space he needed to leave on the inside and thought he was well ahead of me. But at the same time, I'm wondering here if we had made a mistake and got ourselves a penalty. But it didn't look like we had anywhere else to go, and there was enough room for Gladius on the outside. And thankfully the game didn't seem to think we had made any mistakes. And now it was Gladius's turn to make the move on me. Things have moved up a notch as we go into Curvo Grande, and I have to back off to keep myself from bottling it, as the slipstream can make it quite tricky to go flat out. It's like as if we are in the first lap again as we head to Della Roggia, and I pull off my best imitation of Daniel Ricciardo as I brake as late as possible and make the overtake. Unfortunately, it's not as clean as I would have liked it, as Gladius does tap me on the back just to say, "Hey, I'm still here, you're not getting away with this." And I think saying that in Italian is gonna sound a lot better and also a lot meaner. The race is still not over, there's still 3 laps to go, and on top of that, we no longer have a slipstream to hold on to. As happy I am to be leading a manufacturer's championship race, there's still enough time left for the others to catch up, for us to make a mistake and ruin all the work we have done up to this point, or the tires to simply keep up on us and destroy our pace. So now the tables have turned and all the pressure is on us to bring it home for a win. And coming out of Ascari, you can see Gladius in the Mercedes falling off and making a considerable gap. So now we have a bit of room left to breathe, giving us a chance to be a bit more lenient on the brakes. So we're gonna do another skip forward to the 13th lap. And coming out of Lesmo 1, immediately what I notice is that the brake markers have completely disappeared from Lesmo 2. So now we have a new curveball thrown right at us, and as you can see, the Merc misses his braking point and ends up on the gravel, which I don't blame him for, as we all use those markers as our braking points. I think that is very much a lesson in picking the right brake markers, which ideally would be ones that cannot be destroyed, as you can never know what could happen throughout a race. So now Gladius is no longer in the picture with the Gulf Aston Martin breathing down my neck. Gladius did a really good job holding on, and it sucks to see what just happened right there. So we're going to skip ahead for the last time. We come around Della Roggia, and as you can see, the Aston Martin has made quite the gains in closing the gap. I would be lying if I said I wasn't nervous, as he's in the window of the slipstream and could make his move up on any of the straights very easily. But coming out of Lesmo 1, he goes really wide into the gravel, and into Lesmo 2, I think he braked just a little bit too early as he ended up falling back a bit. So it's pretty clear that the missing brake markers did work in our favor, as we were able to hit our braking points by remembering that we braked just as we hit the rev limiter on the 3rd gear, and the others were not able to adapt to that situation. I think the scenario would have been way different if the brake markers were not destroyed, and the Aston Martin would probably be able to do an overtake on the straights leading to Parabolica. Unfortunately now he's too far off to be able to make a move on us, and we are able to come home straight to our first and hopefully not the last win of our debut Manufacturers Championship Series. I really like this race for how much strategy came into play, and I wish this is what we had more of in the daily races. So thank you for watching, and subscribe for more GT Sport content, and enjoy the well-deserved victory for Racing Point. Bye.